In the heart of Africa's Great Rift Valley lies a land that holds humanity's greatest secret. Ethiopia isn't just a country with an ancient past, it's where your story began. This is where 40% of the world's most significant hominid fossils have been discovered, making it the true cradle of mankind. Picture this. 3.2 million years ago, a female walked upright across the Ethiopian highlands. Her name was Lucy, and she belonged to the species Australopithecus afarensis. When researchers found her partial skeleton in 1974 in the Afar region, they revolutionized our understanding of human evolution. But Lucy wasn't alone. The Gona archaeological site revealed something even more extraordinary. The oldest known stone tools on Earth, dating back 2.6 million years. These simple yet revolutionary implements mark humanity's first technological innovation. As the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, Ethiopia's inhabitants made another breakthrough. In the highlands, communities began domesticating native plants like teff and enset, creating some of Africa's earliest agricultural societies. By the first millennium BCE, Ethiopia contained a diverse mosaic of cultures. The Agar people occupied the central highlands, while coastal communities traded with southern Arabia. This cultural exchange would soon give birth to Ethiopia's first kingdom, setting the stage for 3 millennia of extraordinary history. Around the 10th century BCE, something remarkable happened in northern Ethiopia. The kingdom of DMT emerged in what is now Tigray, representing a fascinating blend of indigenous African and South Arabian influences. This wasn't just another small African state. It was a sophisticated civilization that constructed stone temples, developed irrigation systems, and mastered iron metallurgy centuries before many European societies. The people of DMT created one of Africa's earliest writing systems, adapted from South Arabian script. Though we can read their words, their full meaning remains tantalizingly mysterious. Archaeological evidence suggests DMT was far more influential than previously thought, with trading networks extending across the Red Sea to Yemen and possibly as far as Egypt and India. Ivory, gold, and obsidian from the Ethiopian highlands traveled these ancient routes, establishing trade patterns that would define the region for centuries. When DMT fragmented around 500 BCE, it laid the groundwork for something even more extraordinary: the rise of Aksum. By the 1st century CE, this new kingdom had consolidated control over northern Ethiopia, transforming from a small city-state into one of Africa's most powerful ancient empires. What made Aksum truly exceptional was its economic innovation. The kingdom became one of the few African states to mint its own currency, producing gold, silver, and bronze coins that facilitated international commerce. These coins featured royal portraits and Greek inscriptions. Greek served as the international language of trade, making Aksumite currency recognizable from the Mediterranean to India. The most visible symbols of Aksumite power were their monumental stelae, massive obelisks carved from single pieces of granite, some reaching heights of over 100 feet. The largest stela, which eventually collapsed, weighed over 500 tons. These engineering marvels marked royal tombs and showcased technical capabilities that still impress modern engineers. But perhaps most remarkably, a 3rd century Persian document listed Aksum as one of the world's 4 great powers, alongside Rome, Persia, and China, recognition of genuine importance in ancient geopolitics. In the early 4th century, a young ruler named Ezana ascended to the throne of Aksum. His reign would permanently alter not just Ethiopia's religious landscape, but its entire identity for the next 1,700 years. The transformation began with an unusual encounter: a shipwrecked Syrian Christian named Frumentius. According to historical accounts, Frumentius and his brother were traveling when their ship stopped at an Aksumite port. Local people attacked the vessel, killing everyone except the 2 brothers, who were taken to serve at the royal court. Frumentius became tutor to young Ezana, gradually introducing Christian ideas to the future king. Around 330 CE, Ezana embraced Christianity, making this conversion decades before the official Christianization of the Roman Empire. The evidence appears clearly in royal inscriptions. Earlier texts invoke traditional gods like Astar and Mahrem, while later ones begin with phrases like "in the faith of God" and "the power of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit." Even Aksumite currency transformed, with early coins featuring crescent and disc symbols, while later issues prominently displayed the Christian cross. The Christianity that took root in Ethiopia was unique. Rather than erasing indigenous traditions, the new religion incorporated elements of local culture. Ethiopian Christianity maintained practices with apparent Jewish influences, while developing distinctive artistic styles, liturgical music, and religious literature in the Ge'ez language. Ezana's conversion established a precedent that would define Ethiopian identity through centuries of change. This Christian identity became a unifying force that transcended regional and ethnic differences, helping Ethiopia maintain cultural continuity even during periods of political fragmentation. By the 7th century, the mighty kingdom of Aksum began to falter. Environmental degradation, the rise of Islamic powers controlling Red Sea trade routes, and internal political pressures slowly eroded the empire's foundations. As Aksumite power faded, Ethiopia entered a period of political fragmentation that lasted for centuries. But around 1137 CE, a remarkable renaissance began. The Zagwe dynasty emerged from the highlands of Lasta in north-central Ethiopia, establishing control over much of the former Aksumite territories. These rulers faced a significant challenge. They couldn't claim descent from the old Aksumite kings, who traced their lineage to Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Instead, they came from the Agor ethnic group, previously subjects rather than rulers. To overcome this perceived disadvantage, the Zagwe monarchs emphasized their religious devotion, positioning themselves as guardians of Ethiopia's Christian heritage during a time when Islam was expanding throughout the region. This strategy reached its extraordinary peak under King Lalibela, who reigned in the late 12th and early 13th centuries. Lalibela commissioned what many consider one of the world's most astonishing architectural achievements: 11 monolithic churches entirely carved from solid volcanic rock. Unlike conventional structures built upward, these churches were created by excavating downward, removing thousands of tons of stone to reveal complete buildings within the living rock. The engineering achievement is staggering. Workers cut deep trenches around massive blocks of stone, then hollowed out interiors to create doors, windows, columns, floors, and ceilings. The largest church, Bet Mariam, measures 108 by 75 feet and stands 36 feet high, all carved from a single piece of rock. Each structure features intricate designs, including arched doorways, window lattices, and interior decorations that required precise planning and execution. Beyond their technical brilliance, the churches reflect a profound religious vision. The complex follows a symbolic layout representing Jerusalem, with a small stream named the Jordan River dividing the churches into two main groups. Historical records suggest Lalibela created this New Jerusalem after Muslim conquests made pilgrimages to the actual Jerusalem dangerous for Ethiopian Christians. This sacred complex allowed worshippers to symbolically visit the Holy Land without ever leaving Ethiopia, a masterpiece of faith carved in stone. In 1270 CE, a pivotal moment unfolded when nobleman Yekuno Amlak overthrew the last Zagwe king. This wasn't merely a change in leadership, it represented a fundamental shift in how Ethiopia understood its own identity. Yekuno Amlak claimed direct descent from the ancient Aksumite kings, and more importantly, from the biblical King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. This restoration of the Solomonic line transformed Ethiopian political ideology. While the Zagwe had legitimized their rule through religious devotion and church building, the Solomonic emperors claimed authority through sacred bloodlines. The emperor became more than a king. He was seen as the anointed of God, a messianic figure responsible for protecting both state and church. Under Solomonic patronage, court chroniclers produced the most important work in Ethiopian literature, the Kebra Nagast, or Glory of the Kings, compiled in the 14th century. This remarkable text blended biblical narratives, Aksumite legends, and political theory into a national epic. It recounted how Solomon and the Queen of Sheba produced a son named Menelik, who traveled to Jerusalem, secretly took the Ark of the Covenant, and brought it to Ethiopia. This narrative positioned Ethiopia as the new Israel and its emperors as guardians of the true faith. The text transformed the dynastic claim into a sacred mission, giving Ethiopian national identity a religious foundation that persisted for centuries. According to this tradition, the Ark of the Covenant still resides in a chapel in Axum, guarded by a single monk who alone can see it. In 1270 CE, Ethiopia witnessed a pivotal moment in its history as the Solomonic dynasty claimed their divine right to rule. They traced their lineage to the legendary King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, establishing a new era of Ethiopian power. The Solomonic rulers created a unique system of governance. Rather than ruling from stone palaces, they established massive mobile royal camps that functioned as moving cities. These camps, complete with imperial tents and thousands of followers, allowed emperors to maintain direct control over their vast territories. As the empire expanded, it incorporated diverse peoples and regions. The royal court became renowned for its scholarship, with monasteries serving as centers of learning and artistic achievement. Ancient texts were preserved, while new works of theology and history were created. Ethiopia's influence extended far beyond its borders. The empire maintained diplomatic relations with distant Christian kingdoms, where it was known as the realm of Prester John. This medieval Ethiopian empire laid the foundation for modern Ethiopia's boundaries, though its legacy of highland Christian dominance would create lasting social dynamics. The relative peace of Ethiopia's Christian kingdom was shattered in 1529 by one of Africa's most devastating religious conflicts. Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi, known as Ahmad Gragn, or the Left-Handed, launched a campaign from the Muslim Adal Sultanate that would transform the region forever. This wasn't merely a territorial dispute, it was a full-scale religious war that nearly destroyed Christian Ethiopia. Ahmad declared his campaign a jihad against the Christian highlands, mobilizing fighters motivated by religious zeal and the promise of plunder from Ethiopia's wealthy monasteries and churches. What made this conflict particularly devastating was the technological advantage employed by Adal's forces. The Ottoman Empire had supplied Ahmad with firearms, cannons, and trained musketeers, weapons Ethiopian defenders had never encountered. Emperor Lebna Dengel initially dismissed the threat, confident in his kingdom's history of repelling invaders. This miscalculation proved catastrophic. Ahmad's forces employed innovative tactics, using smaller, mobile units that navigated difficult terrain while avoiding direct confrontation with larger Ethiopian armies. When battles occurred, Ottoman-supplied firearms gave Ahmad's fighters decisive advantages against Ethiopian warriors armed primarily with spears and swords. By the mid-1530s, Ahmad had captured and burned the ancient city of Axum, sacked countless churches and monasteries, and seized control of approximately two-thirds of the Ethiopian highlands. Emperor Lebna Dengel fled into remote mountain strongholds with his remaining supporters. Christian communities throughout conquered territories faced terrible choices: convert to Islam, pay tribute, or face destruction. With his empire crumbling, Lebna Dengel sent desperate appeals to Portugal, a rising European power with outposts along Africa's eastern coast. The Portuguese, concerned about Ottoman expansion and motivated by the prospect of finding Prester John, responded to the Ethiopian plea. In 1541, a small Portuguese expedition arrived with 400 musketeers led by Cristóvão da Gama, son of the famous explorer Vasco da Gama. The tide turned decisively at the Battle of Huayna Daga in February 1543, where Ahmad Gran was killed by a Portuguese musket shot. Without their charismatic leader, Adal forces gradually retreated, though fighting continued for years afterward. The war left Ethiopia physically devastated. Countless churches lay in ruins, irreplaceable manuscripts and artwork were destroyed, and agricultural systems collapsed, leading to widespread famine. The Portuguese soldiers who helped defeat Ahmad Gran established a permanent presence, bringing Jesuit missionaries determined to convert Ethiopia to Roman Catholicism. Under Emperor Susenyos I, after years of theological discussions, the emperor officially converted to Catholicism in 1622 and attempted to convert the entire Ethiopian Orthodox Church. This triggered immediate violent backlash, leading to civil wars that resulted in thousands of deaths before Emperor Fasilides reversed his father's policies and expelled all Jesuit missionaries in 1632. Following the religious upheaval of the Jesuit period, Emperor Fasilides made a decision in 1636 that would transform Ethiopia. he established a permanent capital at Gondar, abandoning the centuries-old tradition of mobile royal courts. This marked the beginning of the Gondarine period, a remarkable era of architectural innovation and cultural flowering. Gondar's most striking feature was its stone castles. Unlike anything previously seen in sub-Saharan Africa, Fasilides constructed a royal compound known as Fasil Gebi, surrounded by high stone walls with 12 gates. Within this fortress, he built a multi-story castle with round turrets, arched doorways, and ornate window decorations. Subsequent emperors added their own structures, creating a complex that blended Ethiopian, Portuguese, Ottoman, and even Indian architectural elements. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church flourished under Gondarine patronage. Fasilides funded new churches and monasteries throughout his territories, including the magnificent Debre Berhan Selassie Church, famous for its ceiling painted with hundreds of winged angel faces. The city became a center of artistic production and religious scholarship, with monasteries operating scriptoria where monks produced illuminated manuscripts displaying distinctive Gondarine artistic styles. Gondar developed into an impressive urban center that amazed foreign visitors. European travelers who reached the city in the 18th century called it the Camelot of Africa. The royal court hosted elaborate ceremonies during religious festivals like Timkat, featuring processions of thousands of clergy, nobles, and soldiers that displayed the harmonious relationship between throne and altar. However, this cultural flowering coincided with gradual political decentralization. Provincial nobles gained increasing autonomy, establishing regional power bases while maintaining nominal loyalty to the emperor. This feudalization accelerated after Emperor Iyasu I's reign, as successive rulers struggled to maintain central authority over ambitious regional lords. Around 1769, Ethiopia entered one of its most turbulent periods, the Zemene Mesafint, or Age of Princes. This era marked a profound disintegration of central authority that lasted nearly a century. The imperial throne continued to exist in Gondar, but real power shifted decisively to regional warlords who controlled territory, armies, and resources, while emperors became mere figureheads. Ethiopia fractured into a mosaic of competing territories with shifting boundaries. Major regions like Tigray in the north, Amhara in the central highlands, and the emerging power of Shewa to the south functioned as independent states. These regions engaged in constant warfare, forming temporary alliances that dissolved as quickly as they formed. Some emperors during this period ruled for mere months or weeks before being replaced by another puppet chosen by whichever faction temporarily gained the upper hand. The fragmentation was so complete that European cartographers began redrawing their maps, with some atlases omitting the Ethiopian Empire entirely, instead labeling the region as separate kingdoms. For much of the world, Ethiopia had ceased to exist as a coherent nation-state. The Age of Princes finally began to close with the emergence of Kasa Haile, who would crown himself Emperor Tewodros II in 1855 and begin Ethiopia's imperial reunification. From the chaos of the Age of Princes emerged an unlikely unifier. Kasa Haile, a minor nobleman from northwestern Ethiopia, rose through military conquests and strategic alliances to crown himself Emperor Tewodros II in 1855. He viewed himself not simply as another emperor, but as Ethiopia's divinely appointed savior, destined to rebuild what centuries of fragmentation had destroyed. Tewodros approached reunification with messianic intensity. He established the first standing national army loyal to the throne rather than regional warlords, attempted to modernize the military with European-style artillery, and constructed the mountain fortress at Magdala as his administrative center. His ambitious reforms required foreign expertise, particularly from Britain, but diplomatic misunderstandings led to a tragic end. When British forces reached Magdala in 1868, Tewodros took his own life rather than surrender, but his vision of a unified, modernized Ethiopia inspired subsequent rulers. The coronation of Emperor Menelik II in 1889 marked the beginning of Ethiopia's transformation into a modern state. Unlike his predecessors, who struggled to maintain control over traditional highland territories, Menelik embarked on ambitious expansion campaigns that created the borders of modern Ethiopia. Through military campaigns, strategic marriages, and diplomatic maneuvering, He incorporated vast regions, including Oromia, Sidama territories, the Kingdom of Wolaita, and portions of Somalilands, more than doubling Ethiopia's size. Menelik understood that territorial expansion alone wouldn't create a functioning state. He initiated comprehensive modernization projects, introducing telegraphs connecting distant provinces, building roads for improved commerce, establishing the country's first newspaper, and creating a professional army equipped with modern firearms. He also founded Addis Ababa as Ethiopia's permanent capital, strategically located near the geographical center of his expanded realm. The emperor's diplomatic skills were tested when Italy attempted to establish a protectorate through the deceptive 1889 Treaty of Wuchale. When Menelik discovered that the Italian version claimed Ethiopia was obligated to conduct all foreign affairs through Italy, he repudiated the treaty. This led to the historic Battle of Adwa on March 1, 1896, where Ethiopian forces decisively defeated a modern European army. The Battle of Adwa resonated far beyond Ethiopia's borders. With approximately 7,000 Italian soldiers killed and 1,500 captured, it represented the first time an African nation had defeated a European colonial power on the battlefield. News of the victory spread worldwide, with congratulatory messages arriving from leaders across the globe. For colonized peoples everywhere, Adwa became a symbol of resistance and proof that European military superiority was not inevitable. Emperor Haile Selassie I, who ruled from 1930 to 1974, continued Ethiopia's modernization while maintaining its independence. He introduced the country's first written constitution in 1931, expanded education dramatically, and led Ethiopia into the League of Nations. However, his greatest test came when Mussolini's Italy invaded in 1935, employing chemical weapons and brutal tactics. Though forced into exile, Haile Selassie's prophetic address to the League of Nations, "It is us today, it will be you tomorrow," proved accurate as appeasement policies failed to prevent World War II. Ethiopia's liberation in 1941 restored not just territorial independence, but confirmed its unique position as Africa's symbol of freedom and dignity. On September 12, 1974, the world witnessed the end of one of history's oldest continuous monarchies. Low-ranking military officers coordinated a coup that removed Emperor Haile Selassie after 44 years on the throne. The group called itself the Derg, initially presenting itself as a force for democratic reform, but within months transformed into a hardline Marxist-Leninist regime led by Colonel Mengistu Haile Mariam. The Derg dismantled the entire imperial system with remarkable speed. They abolished the monarchy, nationalized all land and major industries, and eventually renamed the country the People's Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. The fate of the former emperor symbolized their brutality. Haile Selassie died under mysterious circumstances in 1975, likely suffocated on Mengistu's orders, with his body secretly buried beneath palace grounds. By 1977, power struggles led to the period known as the Red Terror. The Derg targeted rival Marxist groups, conducting house-to-house searches and filling prisons with suspected opponents. Conservative estimates suggest 30,000 people died during this period, with victims tortured in makeshift detention centers and bodies appearing on streets as warnings. Parents had to pay for bullets used to execute their children before collecting their bodies. Despite Soviet and Cuban military support, the Derg's economic policies proved disastrous. Massive resettlement programs and agricultural collectivization, combined with drought, triggered the catastrophic 1983 to 1985 famine that killed an estimated 400,000 to 1 million Ethiopians. The international response included the Live Aid concert, but couldn't address the political causes of the famine. When rebel forces entered Addis Ababa in May 1991, they brought a revolutionary vision for Ethiopia's future. The Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, dominated by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, established a transitional government promising a complete break from both imperial and Derg systems. Under Meles Zenawi's leadership, they introduced ethnic federalism, dividing Ethiopia into 9 regions, based primarily on ethno-linguistic lines. This experimental system aimed to address Ethiopia's historical problem of ethnic marginalization, with each region receiving substantial autonomy and the theoretical right to secede. Economically, despite their Marxist origins, they implemented market-oriented reforms that attracted foreign investment. Ethiopia built industrial parks, hydroelectric dams, and modern infrastructure, achieving GDP growth regularly exceeding 10% annually for over a decade. However, this political arrangement contained inherent contradictions. While celebrating diversity, it also hardened ethnic identities that had often been fluid throughout Ethiopian history. Tensions simmered in regions with mixed populations, and questions about land rights and political representation regularly sparked conflicts. When Meles Zenawi died in 2012, the carefully balanced system began showing cracks. Beginning in 2015, massive protests erupted in Oromia, initially triggered by a controversial Addis Ababa expansion plan, but spreading to reflect growing frustration with TPLF dominance. These demonstrations eventually led to the rise of Abiy Ahmed as Prime Minister in 2018. In November 2020, Ethiopia's fragile political balance collapsed entirely when armed conflict erupted between federal forces and Tigray's regional leadership. What started as a confrontation quickly transformed into a complex war involving Eritrean troops and Amhara regional forces. The conflict, characterized by communication blackouts and widespread atrocities, resulted in an estimated 500,000 deaths and displaced over 2.5 million people before ending with the Pretoria Peace Agreement in November 2022. Today, Ethiopia faces the same fundamental challenges it has confronted for centuries: unity, identity, and progress. As Africa's second most populous nation and the diplomatic capital of the continent, Ethiopia's ability to balance its diverse ethnic groups while maintaining territorial integrity remains crucial not just for its 120 million citizens, but for regional stability. The story of humanity's birthplace continues to unfold, carrying forward the resilience and determination that has defined this remarkable land for over 3 million years.